All right, this is Mr. Gillum, and today we're going to learn about adding and subtracting decimals. Now, this also may be a skill that you've had in the past, or maybe you haven't, but the basic steps of adding and subtracting decimals are to first and foremost, the most important step probably, let's put a little star next to that so I know you're listening. The first and foremost, most important step is lining up the numbers by the decimal point, okay? Now, sometimes there's not a decimal point. However, that just means it's hidden behind the last number. Okay, so when I say line up the when I say line up the numbers, I mean line them up vertically. Okay, if you see missing place values, I would like you to fill them with zeros. Then you'll add or subtract, just like we've done in the past. So let's do a few examples here. My first one says find the sum. Now, just a reminder, the word sum is a word used when you are finding the result of addition. So I see 81.6, so I'm going to start with 81.6, and I'm going to add 23.2. Now, I just need to make sure that the decimal places are lined up. So when I write my second number, I'm going to put the decimal point down right underneath the first decimal point. It's very, very important that you are very accurate with where your decimal point is lined up. So don't get in too much of a hurry. Then the 2 comes after the decimal point, and the 23 comes in front. Okay, I need to keep in mind what operation I'm doing, so I'm going to put a plus in front. And now I'm just going to add and carry over like I have in the past. I'm going to start with the farthest most to the right. 6 plus 2 is 8. 3 plus 1 is 4. And 2 plus 8 is 10. Now, sometimes this can be confusing because sometimes we're taught we put a 0 down and we carry the 1. Well, you really are putting down a 0 and carrying the 1, but really 8 plus 2 is 10. You can just write the 10. Okay, now obviously 81 plus 23 is not 1048. So we need to, and part of the reason we keep our decimals lined up is that our decimal stays right where it was in relation to the problem. So really our solution would be, our sum is 104.8. All right, let's take a look at another one here. And again, we have 2 decimal places. So I'm going to start with the 0.129. And sometimes you might not see a 0 in front of the decimal, but it's okay to put a 0 there, okay? Because if there's nothing there, it's just another word of saying math, 0. Now I'm going to put my decimal place for my second one. I'm going to make sure my decimal place is perfectly lined up. Now behind the decimal place, I see 365. I'm going to put those numbers in. In front of the decimal, I see a 2. Put that number there. To keep in mind what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and put an addition sign and my equals. So again, I'm going to add vertically. 9 plus 5 is 14. The 1's place goes down at the bottom, and I'm going to carry over a 10. In this case, it would be the thousandths and the hundredths. Now I have 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 6 is 9. And then 1 plus 3 is 4, and 0 plus 2 is 2. Again, it's very important to keep that decimal place lined up because in addition and subtraction, that decimal place stays right where it's at in the problem. And so my sum would be 2.494. Now let's do some subtraction problems. And when it says find the difference, it just means it's referring to the result of a subtraction problem. In addition, it doesn't matter which order you add them. It could be 23.2 first and then 81.6 second, or 2.365 and then 0.129, and you'll have the same sum. However, in subtraction, it does matter. The first number needs to be on the top of your subtraction problem. Okay, because we're taking away from that number. So I need to make sure that the first number is listed first on my paper as well. And I'm going to make sure that I put my decimal point for my next part right underneath the decimal point that there is. Then I'm going to write my number down, 9 and 8, and in front, a 6. Okay. Now, what I notice is there's nothing underneath the 7, which is okay. Nothing is just a fancy word for 0. So instead of putting, not sure what to do, I'm just going to put a 0 there as a placeholder because 6.98 and 6.980 are in fact the same thing. Now that there's a 0 there, I feel a little better about doing the problem. I'm going to take 7 minus 0, and I'm still going to have 7. And now this is the tricky part. I see that 0 minus 8. Unless we're doing negative numbers, that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow from the tenths place. Okay, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to use I'm going to take away 10 tenths and make it into 1/100th. Okay, so I'm going to add 10 onto the 0, giving me a 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. And again, I have the same dilemma, 0 minus 9. Well, that's not going to work, so I'm going to borrow from the ones digits. And I'm going to put 10 1/10ths on there. I'm going to add 10 to that number. 10 minus 9 is 1. And 3 minus 6, oh, again, not going to work. So I'm going to borrow from my 10's place. I'm going to add 10 to my 1's, make it a 13. 13 minus 6 is 7. Now I was very careful to make my decimal place stay in the same spot. I know that 14.107 minus 6.98 is 7.127. Okay, that would be the difference. I guess before I go on, I should really explain again. I'm going to make a new slide. Could you write this, please, on the back of your paper? Just a quick review. If I have a decimal place, the very next number after the decimal, right here in blue, would be called the tenths. And then the next number after that, I'm going to put in green, would be the hundredths. And then the next number after that, in red, would be the thousandths. And then it would just increase from there and there. Then we would have 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, and so on, millionths. And on the other side of the decimal, for the whole numbers, we would have the ones, the tens, the hundreds, and we would go on and on and on and on. So you can see kind of that they parallel each other on either side. And so when we're crossing out the number in front and adding on to the second number, we're adding 10 on. That's because let's say we had like 23 minus 4. Okay, if we were doing it the way we were just doing it. The reason I can cross out the 2 and make it a 1 and add 10 onto 3 is because 10 ones is the same as 1 10. So that's why this would change it to a 13. We would get a 9 and a 1, like so. Okay, so when you're borrowing 10 of one unit, or you're changing one unit into 10 of the smaller unit. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure if you ever explained that, why that is, but you're borrowing 1 of a bigger unit to make 10 of a smaller unit. And that's why we add 10 on when we're crossing out and we're changing the numbers. So 7.942 minus, I'm going to go ahead and put my decimal point first because I want to make sure that that's lined up. Then a 1 3 comes after and a 2 comes in front. Now again, we're missing a number for the 2 to subtract from the 2. So I'm going to put a little placeholder 0 in there so it's nice and lined up, and I'm going to solve the problem. 2 minus 0 is 2, 4 minus 3 is 1, 9 minus 1 is 8, and 7 minus 2 is 5. No borrowing at all. I'm sure that's probably the word that you've used in the past. And I know my decimal place can stay right where it's at. And finally, I have this big number, 234. And I don't see a decimal place on this one. So very importantly, if you don't see a decimal point, it's hidden behind the last number. So in this case, I don't see a decimal point in this number, so I know it's hidden behind the last number. I'm going to go ahead and put a decimal point there because I see that what's coming up, I do have a decimal point for. My second one, I'm going to put my decimal point right under that hidden one that was there. I'm going to write the stuff that was after, a 5, and the stuff that was before, a 25. And so notice how I have those decimal points lined up perfectly. That's very, very important. And I don't have anything to subtract the 5 from, so I'm going to put a 0 there. And I notice also that this 2 doesn't have anything to subtract. So I'm going to put a 0 there. Now it's just a matter of borrowing. So I'm going to borrow 10 ones. Sorry, I'm going to borrow 1 1 and give myself 10 tenths, just like that. 10 minus 5 is 5. And then I have 3 minus 5. Well, that's not good either. I'm going to borrow 1 10 and add 10 ones on. 13 minus 5 is 8. And 2 minus 2 does work, so we can put a 0 there. And 2 minus 0 is 2. Put a little point right there. 208.5 would be my difference. Okay, so make sure those decimal points are lined up before you start doing your work, and you'll be good to go. If you didn't get this on your paper, make sure you write that down. I think that's important. That's it.